Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst. And today I'm going to talk again on a subject that I talked about on another channel that I operate, the Christ and Culture channel. And today I'm going to bring that conversation over to Christian Answers channel. And that is the reviewing of this Netflix docu-series about the Menendez brothers' murders. They murdered their parents in the living room of their home about 30 years ago. And this Netflix series is going over the whole circumstances around their conviction and their sentencing. And now they're in prison. They've been in prison now for some 25 years or to 30 years. And they have life imprisonment and no opportunity for parole. And the thing that has been in the headlines recently is that the DA, the district attorney in Los Angeles, is now going to review their case again in response to this Netflix docuseries that occurred this year. And they're going to review this case, and they could possibly let these brothers out of prison, or they could resentence them to a lesser sentence than life imprisonment without the opportunity of parole. Maybe they will allow them to enter the parole process where they can appeal and try to get out under certain circumstances. And the reason for this re-evaluation of the Menendez brothers in prison right now is because the Netflix docuseries appeared this year. And a lot of people started asking questions about, well, what about these brothers? They're rotting away in prison, and really, maybe they should be let out. And the family of the Menendez brothers wants them to come out. And they claim that there's some new evidence now that it shows that their father, Jose Menendez, had abused them. And there's even evidence of some other people being abused by this Menendez. One of the band members of the band Menudo back 25, 30 years ago was molested by their father. And all of this is supposed to be, world-shaking evidence that they need to be released. Well, I did a video a few days ago on my other channel, like I explained, and came to the conclusion, no, they should not be released. Because even though there may be some new people that come forward and say, hey, Jose Menendez molested me, that does not change the fact that these two boys walked into their living room of their home where their parents were watching television and shot both of them dead multiple times with a shotgun, leaving a bloody mess in the living room, and then claimed that it was some mafia hit or some cartel hit and tried to get off scot-free until they were exposed and the lie was brought to the truth, and then they were sentenced eventually to life imprisonment without any opportunity for parole. And I concluded that it doesn't really matter how many people this Jose Menendez abused, and even though it was terrible, horrendous, horrible that he abused these sons when they were growing up, and that is a crime in itself, and he deserved to be locked up, possibly for life, exactly what his sons are now, life without opportunity of parole. Maybe that should have been his sentence, but it was not up to the sons to decide for themselves and become judge, jury, and executioner of not only Jose Menendez, their father, but their mother in the same living room was murdered in cold blood by her own sons. It was not their place to decide that they could take it upon themselves to kill their parents and get away with it. And now there are people screaming for their release. Kim Kardashian is probably the most famous celebrity, Hollywood. But the Hollywood jet set and the celebrity set out there in California want the Menendez brothers released. And now there are some even Christian commentators that are saying that they should be released. I talked about the podcaster Becket Cook, who lived in California. I'm not sure if he's out there now, but he claims that he lived right near where this murder took place in the 90s. And now he's jumping on the bandwagon and saying, hey, these brothers need to be released. They've suffered enough. The same thing as Kim Kardashian is claiming, and some of the other people in Hollywood are clamoring for these brothers' release. Well, what I said in that other video, and I'll say today, is that this is all based on emotionalism. Because if you follow the series, and I'm beginning to watch through the whole series, I haven't got to the very end, but I'm starting off, I'm in episode 4, and I think it goes to 8 or 9 episodes. So I'm halfway through the series, and I have to say that my initial conclusion that these brothers deserve to be locked up for the rest of their lives is still valid after watching almost half the series. And the reason I say that is because everything in the series so far has led me to conclude that these brothers had no justification in killing their parents in cold blood. They had justification for going to the authorities, whether it's the federal authorities or the state of California authorities or some detective or some advocacy group, or doing something other than first-degree murder to their parents. They had the opportunities to do something different, and they didn't. They chose the most extreme measure of justice, and they decided they were going to be the executioners of justice, which you can't have in a civilized society. And if anyone starts to think it through, they're going to realize, no, you can't have individuals running around society deciding what is justice and administering execution on people that they're mad at or they have a cause against. No, that's what the courts are for. That's what the legal system is for. That's what the justice system is for. Now, it doesn't mean that the justice system is perfect. In fact, it can actually be the case that the justice system in no country of the world is perfect. And in some countries of the world, it's quite corrupt. And in the United States, in places, it's very corrupt. But unless you want to go back to the Stone Age, unless you want to go back to ancient times and uncivilized eras, you have to go through the system. And these brothers did not go through the system. They didn't even try to go through the system. They took action on their own, and that is not justifiable. They committed first-degree murder of their own parents, and then they lied and tried to cover up about it, and they deserve to rot in jail for the rest of their lives for that crime, because you cannot let people do what they did and get away with it. Even 30 years later, they should not be released, and Christians should not be advocating for their release. There's no sense in that. There's no logic in that. So what I want to do today is, in this episode, is I want to review some of the things that are takeaways from this little mini-series after having watched a number of episodes. And I want to show, first of all, that the murder of their parents was portrayed in this docuseries, this documentary series on Netflix, as a brutal massacre. And it actually was. The boys meticulously planned out how they were going to kill their father and their mother. They had it all planned out. It was premeditated. It was not a crime of passion. You know, sometimes there might be situations and circumstances where someone catches, say, their wife in bed with some boyfriend in their home, and the husband, in a fit of rage, grabs a baseball bat and hits the guy over the head and kills him. Okay, that's crime of passion. And perhaps the judge and the jury will decide that yes, he's guilty of murder, but it's not first degree, it's manslaughter. It's a lesser degree because it was a crime of passion in the moment, that kind of thing. This was not that. These boys decided ahead of time, could be weeks, I'm not sure if it was weeks or months. It was quite a ways ahead of time. And then they plotted and they planned and they schemed and went about meticulously getting the materials they need and making sure that it was the right time to kill their parents on a Sunday when the maid would not be there, and all these details they thought through. So this was a premeditated murder, not a crime of passion, not in the moment. They were not acting in self-defense. You cannot argue self-defense when there is no immediate threat. So the father was not threatening to molest them. That could have been a self-defense argument. Say the father was trying to sexually assault one of the brothers, and he picks up a baseball bat and beats the father over the head and kills him. Okay, that could be argued self-defense because the father was trying to do him physical harm, sexually abuse him, and he was fighting back. Okay, you could think of that. Or say there's a situation where the father's attempting directly trying to molest one of the boys, and the boy runs into the office and knows where the gun is and grabs a gun, and the father keeps coming at him and he shoots the father. Again, that could be argued self-defense under the circumstances because he's under direct physical danger and he's fighting back. He's trying to fight back in self-defense. Okay, that could be argued. This was not that. The father and the mother, Jose and Kitty Menendez, were in their living room watching TV on the couch. The boys walk in, open the doors, have shotguns in their hand, and start unloading their shotgun shells into their parents. That is cold-blooded murder. That is premeditated first-degree murder. And these people today that are arguing and clamoring for their release, really, you want to release these monsters into society after that? Why should these boys be released into society after that? And they're going to claim that, well, it was actually self-defense because they were molested as boys. And this brings up another issue. There were plenty of opportunities for these young men. They're not just boys now, they're young men. There were plenty of opportunities for these young boys to simply run away from home. There are thousands of children even, young people, teenagers that run away from home because of the home life situation. And they're on the streets. These were wealthy, privileged, actually pampered, spoiled, rich kids, and they had money and they had means. And in fact, the older one was actually a college student clear across the country on the East Coast at Princeton University, an Ivy League school, a very prestigious school. And if he had wanted to, he could have simply stayed on the East Coast, or he could have dropped out of college out there, found himself a new location, figured out how to get enough resources to work on his own, got himself a job, lost himself. In fact, in the movie series, in the TV series Breaking Bad, that's exactly the region where Walter, the drug kingpin, goes to get away from the law. He goes up, I think it's Vermont or New Hampshire, somewhere in the woods, and gets away from the law enforcement agencies or whatever, and stays up there. This brother, the older one, who was over on the East Coast while his family was living on the West Coast, he could have stayed there. So he could have gotten away from his father. And if he had wanted to, he could have plotted and spent that energy and that time and the resources trying to figure out how he could bring his brother out of that too. And they could both work together. They seem to be smart enough individuals. The one brother, like I mentioned before, was in Princeton University. You really can't get into Princeton without being smart. So he had some smarts. He could have gone to law enforcement on the East Coast. He could have gone to the FBI. He could have gone to all kinds of different people, advocacy groups, abuse groups. Granted, there aren't as many of these sexual abuse hotlines and groups as there are today, but there were some available at the time, and he could have pursued that, but he didn't pursue that. And the same with the younger boy. I mean, he's, 18? And he could have run away from home and gotten out of the situation that way. Or he could have done a number of other things, or he and his brother could have helped each other and figure out a way to do this, short of killing and murdering their parents. So the people that want these boys to finally be released out of jail, what is that saying? Is that saying, well, I guess you can slaughter your parents and murder them in cold blood and eventually get out of jail and live a good life? No. And one of the things that also bothers me is that people like Becket Cook, the Christian podcasters, who are operating on this totally emotional level, this totally immature emotional level. I mean, adults have to think with their minds. They have to think through principles. You have to think through justice issues. That's why judges have to be rational. They have to be objective. They have to be calm. They can't get caught up in the emotions of things. And that's what I see these people that are clamoring for the release of these boys. They're caught up in the emotion of, oh, they suffered so much, and especially after their testimony. Well, during this documentary series, all the evidence points to really spoiled, privileged, really vain, prideful, cocky, rich kids doing their rich kids thing, spending money, getting into fancy clothes and fancy cars and doing whatever they want to do. There isn't anything to be sympathized about in the first few episodes, because it shows them after they commit the crimes, they start spending money like crazy, racking up huge bills, buying Rolex watches, buying high-price sports cars, fancy clothes, just burning through money. And nothing in the initial part of this docuseries would ever lead you to have sympathy for them. Now, the thing that changes is that the family hires a lawyer, Leslie Abramson, and she realizes that because they've been abused by their father, that she can use their abuse story as a way to get sympathy from the jury, and she could possibly get them off the murder charges because of what they suffered at the abuse of their father. Now, I don't want to minimize the abuse that they suffered from their father. No boys should ever have to go through that. No child should ever have to go through that. This man was a monster. Jose Menendez, according to the testimony of the boys, and I believe the testimony of the boys. I mean, I'm not disputing their testimony. But the question that any rational person has to ask is, does the testimony of these boys to abuse by their father, does that justify them slaughtering their parents in the living room with shotguns? I mean, they didn't just kill their parents, and that's what the detective were curious about, because the boys were always talking about, well, it must be a mafia hit, or it must be the cartel was taking revenge because Jose had a lot of business dealings with all kinds of diverse people. And he must have angered or alienated someone, and then they put a hit on him. The detectives were curious because it's like, this was too sloppy for a mafia hit. The mafia does a cleaner job. They shoot the person in the head. The cartel, one bullet to the head, or they shoot him in the chest, or it's a lot cleaner in the language of the detectives. But they said this was messy. This was it was a slaughter. They basically blew the head almost off of their father and shot the mother in the hand and blew her hand off, and then shot her in the chest, and with a shotgun. Shot sprays wide. The pellets spray all over the place. This is not like a single rifle shot that goes right in directly. This is a sprayed slaughter, brutal, gory, bloody mess. And the detectives were curious as this doesn't look like the mafia. It doesn't look like the cartel. This looks like something else. And it was. It was the boys taking vengeance on the parents. For the father, for the abuse, and the mother for covering up and not doing anything and not being on their side and trying to help to stop it. So they took vengeance. The Bible says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. But these boys said, no, vengeance is ours, and we're going to take vengeance. And it was a revenge killing. It was revenge. It was payback for what Jose had done, and it was payback to the mother who didn't stop it. And so they executed not only the father who did the abuse, but they executed the mother. Now, I said in the previous video before that these boys should have gotten the death penalty, because the Bible talks about in Genesis 9:6, if you take someone's life, your life will be taken. That's capital punishment, and that's what God says in the Bible. So as Christians, we are for the basic idea of capital punishment in murder cases. So these boys, biblically speaking, under a Christian worldview, should have been tried, convicted, and executed promptly. Not only for their sake, but for the sake of the community around them, to show the criminal elements that, look, this is what happens when you commit first-degree murder. When you want to take someone's life, you better think about it, because your life will be taken as a result. But it wasn't done that way, because California gave them the life imprisonment without parole, which is a very severe punishment, but very well deserved in this case. And now people are asking them to be released, and they think they've suffered long enough. And Becket Cook, the Christian podcaster, says they suffered all of this abuse, and then they were shoved in jail and prison, and now they're suffering the rest of their life. So their whole life is suffering. Well, the whole life suffering thing, that's due to their own actions, okay? That's the consequence of their radical decision to kill their parents. So again, the sympathy card is being played here, and we see this in the docuseries when the Leslie Abrams finds out that they were abused. She didn't know that originally when she was going to represent them, and she was really worried. How in the world do you get two brothers who committed first-degree murder of their parents off murder charges, and then it comes out that they were abused by their father? And she said, I will use that as the defense. And so she played up the abuse of these two brothers by the father to the point where she put them on the stand and they gave testimony, and it was heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, emotionally disturbing testimony of what they had to went through with their father's sexual abuse. And it's disgusting what they had to go through. But my question, again, over and over again, is, does that give justification for two brothers to slaughter, murder in a bloody way their own parents in the living room, just walk in, burst in the door with shotguns and blow their heads off and blow the head off of their father and just shoot up their mother? Does that justify that? And the answer is obviously no, it doesn't. And now they're going to bring in all kinds of other testimony about this band member of Menudo when Jose Menendez was with a record company. And Jose had molested this band member when he was a boy, and maybe some other person testimony. What does that change the basic principles? What does that change? It doesn't change anything. They're still guilty of murder, first-degree murder, and just because they were abused does not give them the license to kill. Not in a civilized society. This is not back in ancient times when there was no justice system, when there were no law courts, law of the jungle, kill or be killed. Do we want to go back to that? No, we don't want to go back to that. We have a justice system. It's imperfect, often, sometimes corrupt. We saw this lawfare movement where the liberal leftists were trying to put Donald Trump into prison for just any reason they could find. And so they were throwing all kinds of legal charges against him just in an effort to try to get him to drop out of the presidential race or throw him in jail so he couldn't be a president. And they were using what is called now lawfare. Instead of warfare, lawfare. Okay, that's a corruption of our justice system. And that's just one example. There are corruptions in our justice system. It was also probably a corrupt L.A. legal system around the time these brothers killed their father, and they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to actually get justice if they went to the police, because they were afraid that the police would then go to Jose Menendez, who was well connected, and it would turn out even worse. So no doubt there is corruption, but again, you can't take the law into your own hands. You can't be judge, jury, and executioner. You can't decide on your own as a citizen that you're going to execute someone for their crimes. That's the role of the state. Romans in the book, the New Testament, talks about that God establishes governing authorities to punish the evildoers, okay? So even if they don't do that perfectly, even if they do that incorrectly sometimes, even if they botch up the justice, there are governing authorities, and you have to work through the governing authorities. You cannot go directly and kill people like these brothers did. So I would highly recommend that you watch the Netflix series. Unfortunately, there is a lot of profanity. There's a lot of crudeness. There are some disturbing parts, especially the actual scene of when the boys murdered their parents. That was actually done very graphically and probably overdone. But it does show you the basic truth that these boys are monsters. And what they did was monstrous. And they don't deserve to be released. And if I were them, I would thank my lucky stars that I wasn't executed, because under biblical and Christian principles, they deserve the death penalty for what they did to their parents. And just because they have an emotional story to tell doesn't change the facts that they murdered their parents. So do see the series, and if it does anything more interesting, I will make a second part. God bless. See you back next week.